Welcome everyone to the Endless Stories channel, where you will find with us the pleasure of listening to many interesting stories. If you like today's story,
Do not forget to support us with the subscription and like button.
we leave you to listen to the story.
Deep in the English countryside, the town of Oxfield lived in quiet and sedentary surroundings. Narrow streets, centuries-old stone houses, and trees swaying in the cold winds, coming down from the mountains made the town a place far removed from the hustle and bustle of the modern world. The townspeople, simple and ordinary, knew each other well, and there was nothing out of the ordinary to disturb their daily lives. But that night was different. It was raining heavily when some of the residents witnessed a strange phenomenon in the sky. A bright flash of light split the dense clouds, as if a meteor or shooting star was falling towards the earth. Everyone was drawn to the windows to watch this rare celestial show, but the light suddenly disappeared, as if it had never existed. The next morning, something unusual was discovered in a remote field on the outskirts of the town. There was a deep hole, and in the middle of it was a strangely shaped stone, unlike any they had ever seen before. The stone was unnaturally smooth, gray-black in color, and emitted a faint glow in the sunlight. It looked like something out of this world. Lilith Ferguson, a girl in her 20s, worked in the old local library. Her life was not exciting at all. She spent most of her time among the old bookshelves, dreaming of escaping to a different world. One night, when she heard about the discovery of the strange stone, curiosity led her to visit the field to see the stone for herself. When Lilith arrived at the site, the wind was blowing lightly, and the sky was overcast. There was no one near the stone, just her and the silence that surrounded her. She slowly walked towards the stone, feeling her heartbeat quicken. There was something strange and attractive about this stone, as if it was inviting her to touch it. She reached out her hand cautiously and touched the surface of the stone. The moment she touched it, she felt an overwhelming energy flow through her body. It was as if something had opened up inside her, something she had never known before. She quickly stepped back, trying to comprehend what had happened, but the stone did not move, nor did its shape change. It was as if nothing had happened, but Lilith knew that something was wrong. She returned home, but a strange feeling began to take over her. She had mysterious nightmares every night after that incident. In those dreams, she saw other worlds, strange creatures with terrifying shapes, and whispers in a language she did not understand. And every time she woke up, she had a vague feeling that something was happening inside her, something incomprehensible. In the following days, Lilith began to notice strange changes. Simple things at first, like her ability to affect things around her in an unusual way. She could move small objects without touching them and manipulate the weather slightly. But as time passed, these powers began to grow, and she began to feel that the stone she had touched had given her supernatural powers. At the same time, there was a deep sense of threat. She had the same recurring dreams. She saw the mysterious shadow following her everywhere. She saw the strange creatures whispering her name. She did not know if it was a dream or reality. Professor Jack Hudson, an astronomer and paranormal investigator, arrived in town after hearing reports of the falling stone. He was known for his ability to analyze mysterious phenomena that other scientists could not explain. When he first met Lilith, he felt something different about her. He knew there was a connection between the stone and this girl. Jack and Lilith began investigating together. The professor knew that this stone was more than just a piece of outer space. He suspected that it was very ancient and perhaps held an unknown cosmic energy. But the deeper they investigated, the more they felt threatened. The stone was like a timed weapon, waiting for the right moment to unleash its full power. The days passed slowly, and with each moment, fear grew inside Lilith. She didn't know how to control the power she gained from the stone. She wasn't even sure if it was a blessing or a curse. Every time she used her abilities, she felt subtle changes in her body and mind. The air around her seemed to move differently, as if she was connected to the world in ways she didn't yet understand. One dark night, Lilith sat in her small room, leafing through old books she had gotten from the town library, trying to find any clue as to what was happening to her. At the same time, the sound of the wind outside her window grew louder. Suddenly, she felt a strange presence in the room. She turned towards the shadow that had begun to appear from the dark corner of the room. Her eyes widened in horror as she watched. A black-shaped entity quietly moved towards her. It had no distinct features, just a thick shadow that closely resembled her body. Lilith tried to back away, but the shadow wasn't actually chasing her, it was waiting. It felt like it was a part of her, a dark part that had been separated from her since she touched the stone. Despite her fear, she felt a strange pull towards the entity. Before she could move or speak, the shadow disappeared just as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a deep sense of danger. The next day, Lilith decided to talk to Professor Hudson about what she had witnessed. When she met him in his office filled with astrological maps and ancient manuscripts, his eyes sparkled with curiosity. He listened to everything she said about the shadow and how she felt it was following her. The professor seemed to expect something like this to happen. "Professor Hudson, the shadow you're talking about isn't something strange in the world of paranormal phenomena. It's more like a part of you, perhaps a dark part of yourself, that manifests itself due to the power you gained from the stone. But I don't think it's just a reflection. This entity may be more closely related to what the cosmic rocks hold." As the days passed, the shadow began to appear more frequently. Whenever Lilith felt afraid or stressed, the shadow seemed to feed on her negative emotions. The more she used her abilities, the shadow grew stronger and more real. She no longer saw just a black, featureless entity, but began to feel that it was an independent being trying to talk to her, trying to control her in some way. Meanwhile, the town was living in a state of anxiety. Some of the residents began to talk about strange incidents that occurred at night, unnatural sounds, sightings of ghosts and shadows passing through the houses. Lilith knew that all of this was related to the stone and the shadow that haunted her, but she did not know how to stop it. At that moment, Professor Hudson began to study the stone more deeply. Using his scientific tools and ancient analyses, he obtained amazing information. The stone was not just a piece of space. Rather, according to his theory, it was part of an ancient, living being that came from an advanced alien civilization that disappeared thousands of years ago. The stone was more like the heart of this being, and it seemed that it was looking for someone with a certain spiritual energy to activate its power. This discovery was shocking to Lilith. She did not expect to be just a tool for a strange being who wanted to restore its existence. She began to realize that everything that had happened since she touched the stone was not a coincidence. The stone had chosen her, exploited her to free itself from its earthly prison. But Professor Hudson warned her of something bigger. The stone wasn't just trying to return, it was somehow using Lilith's powers to gather enough energy to completely rebuild itself. If she didn't stop using her powers, the stone might become powerful enough to bring the alien back to life, posing a threat to the entire world. As the danger grew, Lilith decided to confront the shadow again. One night, she went out into the field where she had first found the stone. She stood in the middle of the darkness, the wind howling around her. She knew the shadow would appear, that it had been waiting for this moment. The wait didn't last long. The shadow began to form in front of her, but this time it wasn't just a dark reflection. It looked exactly like her, the same eyes, the same features. The shadow was saying something, but its voice was faint and indistinct. "Shadow," in a calm but terrifying tone, "you have been a part of me all along. You and I are one." Lilith sensed that the shadow's words held some truth, but she refused to accept it. "You are not me. You are something from this stone. You do not belong to me." But the shadow laughed softly. "You are wrong. The stone did not give you power. It only brought out what was always inside you. I am the side you buried away. I am the power of fear and anger, and I will be free." Tension grows. As Lilith faced the shadow, she realized that if she wanted to stop it, she had to control herself first. She had to accept that her power did not come from just the stone, but was part of her own being. She realized that the stone was only a catalyst, and that the shadow would not disappear until she controlled the fear growing inside her. At that moment, Lilith decided to unite with her inner strength. She was no longer afraid of what was happening inside her. Instead of running away from the shadow, she faced it directly. Instead of trying to hide her abilities, she used them deliberately. An epic confrontation. As Lilith merged with her powers, the shadow gradually began to weaken. It was unable to stay in front of her as she took full control of her energy. With each passing moment, the shadow melted away more and more, until it disappeared completely. But Lilith knew this was not the end, but the beginning. After her encounter with the shadow, Lilith felt a profound change in herself. Her power was now under her control, but she couldn't ignore the sense of danger that still loomed over her. The stone, despite everything that had happened, was still there, in the field, as if nothing had happened. Lilith knew that the stone wasn't done playing its part, and that there were more secrets she had yet to discover. Meanwhile, the town was in a state of tension. The residents were becoming more nervous, and reports of strange phenomena occurring at night increased. Mysterious whispering sounds, strange lights appearing and disappearing, and dead animals being discovered under unexplained circumstances. Professor Hudson was not oblivious to these events. He knew that the stone affected more than he had imagined, and that the danger was expanding to encompass everything around him. The professor sat with Lilith in his dusty library, which was filled with strange books and ancient manuscripts that Lilith had never noticed before. On the table, there was a single scroll open, bearing mysterious drawings of the stone's shape and words written in ancient languages. Professor Hudson, I discovered something terrifying. The stone we touched is not just a piece of space. It is part of an ancient entity that has been trapped in this land for thousands of years. The beings you see in your dreams, the shadow that haunts you, are all connected to it. This ancient civilization, of which we know little, used the stone as the heart of its system. The conversation was terrifying. Lilith felt as if she were stuck in a terrifying science fiction story. But what the professor was saying was not just fantasy. It was eerily realistic. Lilith, what do you mean? How can a stone be a living being? Professor Hudson, it is not alive in the sense that we know it. It is a medium. The stone holds within it the memories of that civilization, its power, and perhaps its soul. When you touched the stone, it released its power within you. The being that was trapped inside. The stone was waiting for someone who had the ability to interact with it. In the days after discovering this truth, Lilith began to dream more vividly. The dreams were no longer as blurry as they had been before. She saw strange cities, strange creatures walking on paths made of light, and strange beings speaking in a language she did not understand. But this time, there was something different. She felt as if she was not just observing these dreams, but a part of them. Each dream brought her closer to the truth. One night, a strange face appeared in her dream, an entity with features she could not place. It spoke to her in a strange language, but somehow, she understood it. Entity, you have been chosen. You are the bridge between two worlds. The stone is not just a weapon, but a means to restore an ancient balance between the cosmic forces. Lilith awoke from her dream feeling a strange terror, mixed with a sense of understanding. Something greater than she had ever imagined was happening. It was no longer just the stone, but an ancient cosmic order that was on the verge of collapse or rebirth. The stone was seeking to rebuild its civilization using her power. Lilith decided to face the truth head-on. She and Professor Hudson headed out to the field, where they had first found the stone. The night was dark, and the wind was blowing through the trees around them. But Lilith was no longer as afraid as she had been before. She now knew that she had the strength to face this challenge. When they reached the field, the stone was glowing with an eerie glow, as if it had been waiting for her. The professor stood far away, watching what would happen. Lilith walked over to the stone and placed her hand on it again. This time, she felt a deeper connection than ever before. She could see everything clearly, as if the story of the ancient civilization that had created it was being played out before her. Voice from within the stone, the time has come. You must choose. That moment, Lilith had fleeting visions of two different worlds. One was a world similar to her own, but governed by different laws. A world filled with the creatures she had seen in her dreams. The other was her real world, Earth, the one she knew. The stone offered her a choice. Either allow the ancient civilization to be rebuilt, which would mean the destruction of human civilization as we know it, or destroy the stone and lose the power forever, which would mean the loss of herself as well. Lilith knew the choice was not easy. If she allowed the stone to rebuild its civilization, the Earth would be changed forever, and perhaps no trace of human civilization would remain. But if she destroyed the stone, she would lose the power that had become a part of her. Deep down, she knew that power was not just something external, but was part of herself, of her reality. Lilith stood before the stone, thinking. She knew that her decision would determine her fate and the fate of the world around her. But she also knew that the power she held was not to create destruction, but to protect. Finally, she made her decision. Final confrontation. Concentrating all her energy, Lilith began to release the power that lay dormant within her. The stone trembled beneath her hands, and the light emanating from it grew brighter. It was like a struggle between two immense powers, her own and the stone's. At a crucial moment, Lilith decided to destroy the stone. She let out a loud scream, and energy surged from her body towards the stone. The stone exploded with a bright light, and its fragments spread in the air, but she felt no pain. Instead, she felt liberated. The shadow that had been haunting her since the beginning had disappeared, and the strange entities she had seen in her dreams had vanished. When Lilith woke up the next day, she was in the professor's house. Her body was weak, but she felt an inner peace she had never known before. The stone had been destroyed, and her supernatural power had disappeared, but she no longer needed it. She had faced her fear and overcome it. Professor Hudson sat beside her and smiled as he said, "You did what no one else could do. You saved your world from a force no one could have predicted." When Lilith woke up after the stone was destroyed, life was never the same. It was true that she had lost her superpowers, but the feeling of being freed from the dark entity, the shadow that had haunted her, brought her deep relief. The town, although she did not know the details of what had happened, began to feel a change as well. The strange events that the people of Oxfield had witnessed disappeared with the stone's destruction, and the town returned to its peaceful nature. But Lilith did not feel like she had completely returned to normal life. Despite the loss of her superpowers, something else remained inside her. She had a new understanding of the world, of herself, and of the secrets that were hidden deep within the universe. Weeks passed after the incident, and Professor Hudson visited Lilith regularly. The two of them would talk about what they had experienced, analyzing the details of the power that resided in the stone and the secrets of the mysterious civilization. The professor had always been fascinated by the mystery, but he seemed to have found his ultimate goal. To him, the end of the stone was not the end of the search, but the beginning of something greater. One night, while the professor was talking about his theories about the ancient civilization, Lilith interrupted him and said quietly, "I feel like I haven't figured it all out yet. Destroying the stone wasn't the end, was it?" The professor smiled softly. "You're right, Lilith. What happened with the stone is only a small part of a much bigger story. The civilization that held this power didn't disappear, and it probably still exists in some way. What's most important is that you proved that the power within you was real." In the days that followed, Lilith felt a mysterious calling resonate deep within her. It wasn't just the supernatural power that had returned to her, but another kind of energy was growing within her. This energy wasn't just the ability to control the world around her, but a kind of deep understanding of the universe itself. It was as if what she had experienced had opened doors to other worlds in her mind. The dreams became more vivid, but they were no longer frightening. Instead of terrifying creatures and shadows, she saw scenes of distant worlds filled with intelligent beings and advanced technology. It was as if the stone, though destroyed, had left a part of itself inside her. Lilith decided to return to the field where it all began. She felt she had to stand there one last time, to say goodbye to the place that had changed her life. When she arrived, the field seemed ordinary, just a desolate patch of land under the gray sky. But Lilith felt something deeper. She began to walk slowly, remembering the moment when she first touched the stone. She felt the wind caressing her hair, as if the earth itself was breathing around her. At that moment, she felt a strange presence. It wasn't the entity that had haunted her before, but something different, more peaceful. She heard a faint whisper, as if the earth was speaking to her. "You are now part of us." She didn't know where the voice came from, but it resonated clearly in her mind. In a moment of deep contemplation, Lilith felt that the stone wasn't just a means of unleashing destructive power. It was a bridge between different worlds, ancient and modern civilizations. The ancient civilization was seeking to return, but not through destruction as she had initially thought, but through communication. In the days and weeks that followed, Lilith changed in ways she had never expected. She felt a deep connection with nature around her, and with the universe in general. She no longer needed the superpower she had at first. The understanding she gained from the stone was enough to make her realize that true power comes from within, from awareness of the different worlds that surround us. Lilith began writing down everything she experienced. She would write down her dreams and visions, and record all her discoveries about the ancient civilization that the stone had tried to awaken. She wasn't sure if the world was ready to understand everything she knew, but she felt that it was her mission now to bear witness to what had happened, and perhaps one day pass that knowledge on to the next generation. Professor Hudson, for his part, knew that Lilith no longer needed his guidance. She had transcended everything he had taught her, and had become wiser and deeper than he had ever imagined. He once said to her, "You have become the power you have been searching for all this time."
And now we have reached the end of our story. We hope that you like the story.
We remind you again that if you are not subscribed to the channel,
Subscribe and activate the notification bell to receive all that is new.
until we meet again in a new interesting story.